This is The Weekly on ClickOrlando.com with Justin Warmoth.
Good morning, I'm Justin Warmoth. A week from tomorrow, Florida lawmakers will hold a special session focused on the new 30-year gambling agreement recently negotiated between Governor DeSantis and the state's Seminole tribe. The deal basically gives the tribe the keys to the Florida gambling kingdom, not only expanding their gaming offerings with craps and roulette, but also becoming the major clearinghouse of legalized sports betting. This morning, Florida gaming attorney Mark Dunbar is here to discuss the deal and the potential challenges it faces.
You know, a lot of people saw this deal come down, and on the surface, it looks like, hey, the governor cut a deal with the Seminole tribe, which would pave the way to legalize sports betting in the state of Florida. What sticks out to you about this, and why is it more complex than that?
Well, it's a big deal for the state of Florida. Sports wagering is very much a tourist-driven business. There's not a lot of money to be made directly in it. However, what it means for the people that visit and the supplemental spend that they do if they come here to play sports wagering is a big deal for the state. The numbers that the governor and the tribe agreed to are staggering. You're talking about $2.5 billion over the next 5 years. That's a huge number in recurring general revenue that Florida definitely needs. And so it's the biggest gaming deal that we've ever had, no question. And it's one of the biggest gaming deals that this country's ever seen.
Mm-hmm. The legal challenges that await, we know that there will be. And we're going to get into some of those and the amendment that passed in 2018, whether or not that has any weight when it comes to what just got agreed to. But the special session that's going to be happening on May 17th, what do you expect to happen there in the debate between the legislature?
Well, I think what you're going to see is you're going to see some due diligence by legislators as they vet what this means for Florida as a whole, but also for the legislators' backyards. There's a lot of parochial interests that are involved. We have over 30 pari-mutuels spread out around the state that handle over $1 billion in total gaming that are going to be interested in the discussion. You've seen some pari-mutuels come out very supportive of the deal, and then you've seen some others that are silent. And I expect there's going to be a lot of committee discussion to try and understand what this means for people's backyards.
Yeah. And so before anything can kind of go through, of course, the governor, he cut the deal with the tribe. But this next step, the lawmakers need to sign off on this. And so, take me through that whole portion of it.
Absolutely. So what the Florida law says is the governor has the ability to negotiate and execute a compact, but it does not go effective until the legislature ratifies it. Mm-hmm. So we're basically in step 2, and the legislature has to take the compact up, consider its terms, and decide whether it wants to ratify it. It's not a piece of legislation. It's an up or down vote on the terms of the compact. The legislature cannot amend the compact. Only the governor can amend the compact. And so actually, this is the 5th version of a compact if you go through the history of it. The current one we're operating under is version 3. Version 4, Rick Scott executed and was rejected by the legislature. And now we're on version 5 by Ron DeSantis. The legislature also has corresponding implementing legislation that will go parallel with this. So there will be both the compact as well as implementing legislation. There is speculated to be as many as 7 pieces of legislation needed to implement the terms of the compact. So you're talking about the creation of a gaming commission, corresponding public records exemption, potential fee bills, and then you have the pari-mutuel gobbledygook, I'll say. There's always the catch-all for all of the other legislation, all of the other laws that could be implicated by the gaming compact.
It's far from dotting I's, crossing T's. When it comes down to it. And then the next step, right, the U.S. Department of Interior has to authorize the deal as well?
That's correct. That would be step 3. Step 3 would be the governor hopefully signing off on legislation. Yeah. Once he signs it, the legislation will have an effective date that ties it to the Department of Interior approval. So then it goes to D.C., and the Department of Interior, through its National Indian Gaming Commission, will look at the terms and make sure the terms are fair as it relates to the tribe and the state, to make sure that there was an equal exchange of consideration. Mm-hmm. And then once that is signed off, its final step is to be published in the Code of Federal Register. When that happens, everything can go live.
So 24 states have already legalized sports betting. Florida would be the biggest state to do so if this all gets approved. But how is Florida different? How does it compare to some of the other states that have passed legislation?
Well, every state has their own flavor to it, and this one is going to be unique. We are doing something that no other state has tried or considered. The closest to it is the single point idea that's coming out of New York that's going to be run through their lottery. You have a couple smaller states that do run a lottery only model, but they have licensed additional vendors other than a single one. Mm-hmm. So to do a hub and spoke through a tribe is something that's very unique, and Florida, that's what Florida's rolling out.
So the tribe, just kind of historically speaking, I know that they obviously operate the only casinos in the state of Florida. But up until now, I know that sports betting really, it's not so taboo as it once was. I mean, there are TV shows on ESPN talking about about the lines, about what Vegas has put out there about betting and what have you. And so it's not as taboo as it once was. And so is that kind of like, when it comes to the tribe's point of view and what they're seeing over the last maybe 5 years, 10 years, it's kind of become that, like, where they're kind of more open to it? Is that what you think is behind it?
Well, I think that the public has pivoted. There's no doubt about it. There's overwhelming support for sports wagering now in this country. With the U.S. Supreme Court clearing the path a few years ago for states to get in, and the public overwhelmingly supporting it, it was logical for the tribe to be the next player to step forward and say, hey, this is something we would like to offer in the state of Florida. Now, they have an active brand. They are up and running in New Jersey and in other states and over in Europe. So they are seasoned pros at this. And one of the things that I always tell people is, Jim Allen is one of the best gaming operators in the world, not just in the state of Florida, not just in the country. His team's incredible. And so what you're talking about is one of the major dominant players out there in the gaming world saying, hey, look, we want to offer a new amenity to Florida, but it's not new to their brand.
Got it. Good point. So, people probably see some people on social media or other states, friends in other states, family in other states that can make bets on their phone with a number of different apps that are available in certain states. Is that what, I know that there's a long way to go, but is that what is proposed currently in the state of Florida?
That's what Floridians will be able to do. The concept, you'll be able to go into a Hard Rock casino and bet in a sports book there live, bring your money, sit down, have lunch and watch the game and bet live. But in reality, the majority of it is going to happen on your phone. That's what this concept is. This is going to be mobile wagering. The way it's envisioned, there will also be the ability for your local pari-mutuel to have a sports lounge, but you still will be betting even in their lounge. You'll still be betting on the mobile app. Mm-hmm. There are opportunities for other brands to come in the marketplace, but the core of this is that the wagering will be occurring at the tribal lands. The servers will be at the tribal lands. The wagering instructions will go to the tribal lands for acceptance, mm-hmm. not unlike the way horse racing is handled currently.
Now, in 2018, Florida voters approved Amendment 3, which requires statewide voter approval for future expansions of gambling. Coming up, we'll talk about whether this deal violates that amendment. We'll be right back.
This is The Weekly on ClickOrlando.com with Justin Warmoth.
Welcome back. In a surprise move during the legislative session, Governor DeSantis signed a sweeping gambling deal with the Seminole Tribe that could bring legalized sports betting to Florida, as well as billions of dollars in revenue for the state. But before anything can happen, the Florida legislature has to sign off on the deal, something they'll debate during a special session that gets underway on May 17th. Florida gaming attorney Mark Dunbar is back now to explain why this deal is far from done.
I mean, this is something that a lot of Floridians already do illegally. And so I think that's where the conversation and maybe the person at home that says, well, I don't care about sports or sports gambling, I'm not going to do it, so I don't care about this deal. Why should they care about this deal?
Well, there are 2.5 billion reasons on the next 5 years. There's no question. I mean, $500 million a year in general revenue guaranteed is a massive number. While we did pass a $100 billion budget, the vast majority of that budget is tied to trust funds. That money's tied up. General revenue And finding new general revenue sources is incredibly important because that is what it goes to the schools. That's what goes to the hospitals. That's what goes to law enforcement and things like that. And so $500 million in new general revenue that's available helps keep taxes low, and helps public benefit in lots of programs that otherwise might not get the funding.
I know that that's the headline, is the sports part of this and the sports betting, but the tribe is also able to do some other things at their casinos. Can you talk about some of the other things that could be agreed upon?
Sure. If you're a craps and roulette player, you're going to be pretty excited because there'll be live craps and roulette at the Hard Rock properties. In addition to that, down in South Florida, it allows for some pretty transformative growth to occur down there in the Hollywood Reservation. It's possible that they could bring 3 additional flags down there. I mean, they could do a licensing deal with MGM, Penn Gaming, Las Vegas Sands, the biggest names, and the development that could lead to. You're talking about, it's not $10 billion is not even an exaggeration. I mean, it could be dramatic growth down there on that property over time.
Yeah. People hear those numbers and they're saying, well, why hasn't something like this been agreed upon in the past? So can you give us a little synopsis on why this has not been something that's been able to come to an agreement upon in the past?
Well, by last count, I believe there are 155 lobbyists that are in play for lobbying gaming issues, and they continue to grow by the day as we approach the special session. By the time we get there, I expect there'll be more registered lobbyists than members to vote on the legislation. And that's a lot of special interests. And you have to balance these special interests. And the other problem is it's the misinformation. The misinformation that's already started on this around its legalities and are driven by brands that are essentially going to be potentially shut out of the Florida market. Brands that have no skin in the game here in Florida, some of them that are located overseas, that don't want Florida to go live in this fashion. There are a lot of people that are making millions and millions of dollars on the illegal wagering, sports wagering that's going on. And believe it or not, they put lobbyists in play. And they're cautious in how they hide their names and things, but that's the misinformation is a lot of why it's so difficult.
Florida is a huge pie. And if someone can't get a bite, they're going to do what they can to prevent anyone else from taking a bite out of the Florida pie.
Exactly. And you have, and the corresponding parimutuel legislation doesn't have anything to do with sports wagering. It has to do with whether or not horses are going to run around a racetrack down in South Florida. It has to do with whether or not a parimutuel can move from one location in a county to another location. And there are powerful interests down in South Florida, including the former president of the United States, that would like to see a casino in Doral at his golf course. And they have lobbyists and significant influence. And that has nothing to do with sports wagering, but it will have everything to do with whether or not this legislation, the overall package of legislation, passes. If the old adage is, if everybody doesn't eat, no one does in the gaming world. And that's the balancing interest that these legislative leaders and the governor are going to have to manage in order to thread this needle in the special session.
And I think that, Floridians, they're like, okay, wait, 2018, I remember voting on Amendment 3, which would require statewide voter approval for future expansions of gambling. Does that apply to this? And why doesn't it, if it doesn't?
Amendment 3 does apply and doesn't apply. And I argued the case in the Supreme Court on Amendment 3. And it's important for the viewers and, frankly, no casinos to remember the way it was sold. It expressly does not apply to a gaming compact between the tribe and the state of Florida. It can't because of federal law. And so what you have at the core of this session is a gaming compact between the tribe and the state of Florida. Therefore, the requirement for a statewide referendum, which is what Amendment 3 was all about, does not apply to that. Yeah. And it's in its own terms. So when I say it applies and it doesn't apply, no casinos chose to exclude tribal gaming compacts from Amendment 3. So the compact is not subject to it. As it relates to the debate around sports wagering, there's a lot of discussion around sports wagering in the briefs and before and after the oral arguments. Sports wagering, when they were gathering the signatures, was prohibited everywhere in the country, with the exception of the casinos in Las Vegas and a couple of state lotteries that had parlays. It is not an activity that was traditionally found in a casino. Amendment 3 only applies to activities traditionally found in a casino. So those are, and you now have an interesting court. The courts are full of textualists from the Antonin Scalia mode, and they view words as the guiding documents for any case. And when you say traditionally found in the casinos, those words mean something. And it's going to be a tough time for John Swinski and the No Casinos folks to say, well, what we really meant. You got to look behind those words, Judge. Well, this isn't. We are no longer in the era of that sort of jurisprudence. We are in the era of textualism, and it's going to be a tough argument for them to prevail.
Well, looking back, was that amendment drafted and the language approved before the U.S. Supreme Court ruling in New Jersey?
The court cases were working their way through, but it was all of the research and the drafting of the initial language, yes, was predated. There was a lot of speculation that sports wagering was going to occur, but when they got together to lead the effort, and remember the Seminole Tribe and Disney World were involved, so but it predated PASPA's falling and the Supreme Court's ruling on what happened.
So we know, you mentioned Disney World. We know that they would be someone who would probably be against having a casino next to the resort where, to siphon away money possibly going to them. But also you have to remember that Disney owns ESPN, and
right.
ESPN has shows that talk about sports betting and lines and everything like that and bad beats. And that's what's interesting. And I don't know about whether or not you can sort of forecast what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks, but are they now flipping the script, if you will, and maybe saying, well, they're going to send lobbyists the other side and try to get this thing approved? I mean, I don't know, speculate for me.
Well, I think they've been conspicuously quiet up to this point because they have a significant investment in the sports industry and in the sports wagering industry. The other part that people don't realize about Amendment 3 at its core was not about restricting gambling. In reality, the people that were behind it were a lot more concerned about massive convention space being built in Florida to compete with the I-4 corridor. Mm-hmm. Sports wagering offers no threat to that whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Actually, the smart hoteliers will be the ones that will be building the sports bars and welcoming people in with their mobile apps and saying, come on in, enjoy the game, buy and drink a bunch of beers and buy our wings. Mm-hmm. So that's what I think you're going to see. The organized effort, I know John Swinski's been talking a lot about how they're going to oppose it, they're going to bring litigation, but the real organized effort are the folks that don't like the hub and spoke concept and really would like to have their own brands and make their own book in Florida. And that is just not going to happen. That is not what is going to be on the table in this special session.
And again, the special session gets underway a week from tomorrow on May 17th. As always, to learn more about the deal and the hurdles it still needs to clear, just head to clickorlando.com. I'm Justin Mormith. Hope you have a great Sunday and a happy Mother's Day.